The Sutta, Madhyama Nikaya Sutta number 140. The exposition of the elements. Now this is a very special discourse. Some people are coming. If they come, let them ask them to come in.
Oh, that's
If they okay.
that's a handout.
Huh?
Handout.
Yeah. You can see the beginning of this discourse. The Buddha, the way how Buddha met a man called Pukkusati. Now, Pukkusati was a king in let me see. Then he and Bimbisara exchanged greetings through merchants. He lived in Takkasila, the king of Takkasila. And so he had developed friendship with King Bimbisara in Magadha. And through merchants, they exchanged gifts. So King Bimbisara had sent him golden plate where he inscribed the description of the Buddha. Seeing this description, King Pukkusati was so impressed that he gave up his throne and put on yellow robes by himself without being formally ordained, and went to see the Buddha. And he went to Rajagha. And the Buddha also at the same time, seeing with his clairvoyance, Pukkusati was coming to see him. And Buddha was so impressed with this man's enthusiasm in meeting the Buddha, wanted to meet him on the way. This is very unusual when somebody is coming to see him, he went halfway to meet him. This is very unusual for the Buddha. But because of Pukkusati gave up his throne. You know, being a king is a very highest position in the country in politics. And so he gave up that position and wanted to see the Buddha. And the Buddha therefore had very great impression, this man, and then he went on the way. Pukkusati wanted to go and see the Buddha in Savatthi. From Radhaghat to Savatthi there are about 300 miles. He was so enthusiastic that he took on this journey on foot. Just imagine walking on foot 300 miles. So he came, and there was on the way in Rajagaha, there was a potter who makes pots. He had his hut by the roadside. Pukusati took shelter in that potter's shed at night. So the Buddha, just after a few minutes, he took his place in the potter's hut. Just few minutes later, Buddha also appeared there. It was dark. Pukusati could not recognize who this mendicant was. Buddha went to the potter's. Buddha saw this hut, and he went to the potter's house to get his permission to spend the night in that hut. And potter said, Venerable sir, there is another ascetic in the hut. If he permits, he came earlier, if he permits, you also can spend the night. So the Buddha went and entered the hut, and Pukusati was there, and the Buddha asked him, if it is not too much inconvenience to you, shall I spend the night here? Pukusati said, of course there is plenty of room, you can spend the night. Then, that is how the story begins. Now we go to the Sutta itself. You can see on the okay. At this time I put Pali passage under English translation. In the past you might have seen that I gave verbatim translation, word for word translation. Now this time, since it is too much work for me, I put passage by passage. English passage first and then Pali passage. If I have time, we can go through Pali as well. First I want to spend time with the contents of the sutta. So the Buddha, this is how it's Magadha country, and eventually arrived at Rajagaha. There he went to the potter Bhagava, Bhagava is his name, and said to him, if it is not inconvenient for you, Bhagga, I will stay one night in your workshop. So the Bhagga said, now there was a clansman named Pukusati who had gone forth from the home life into homelessness and so forth. He explained. And then he is already there. If he permits, you can spend the night there. That is the conversation that I mentioned earlier. So, Buddha, out of politeness, sought his permission. He said, Pukusati said, the potter's workshop is large enough, friend. Let the Venerable One stay as long as he likes. So he called the Buddha a friend, because he did not know who he was. Just out of courtesy, he called him, of course, friends, you can come and spend the night. Because this is large enough, then the Blessed One entered, and then Blessed One spent most of the night seated in meditation, and the Venerable Pukusati also spent most of the night in meditation. Then the Buddha thought this clansman conducted himself in a way that inspires confidence. suppose I were to question him, and actually this is very unusual statement, because Buddha knew in advance who Pukusati was. And knowing him in advance, he went to the potter's shed. And for him to think that the clansman conducts himself as in a way that inspires confidence. So Pukusati had already done a lot of meditation. He has, even as a king, according to commentaries, Pukusati even had attained jhanas, fourth jhana, and when he attained that state of meditation, you may not be that much interested in lay life, let alone being a king. So he has only decided to go. So, why Buddha said this? This clansman, Buddha thought that this clansman conducts himself in a way that inspires confidence. Suppose I were to question him. I think this is, in my view, the compiler's interpolation. Because Buddha didn't have to think that way. And then, however, Buddha asked him, under whom have you gone forth, bhikkhu? Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you profess? Now, here he addressed him as a bhikkhu. This is the first time they met. He addressed him bhikkhu. Why he did that? Now, in the conversation, whatever Buddha said there is very normal. Very normal. He called him bhikkhu for him to think. Because he himself did not know who this new arrival is. And therefore, in order for him to give some chance to think, Buddha called him bhikkhu. Then he asked, whom have you gone for, bhikkhu? Pukusati was ordained by himself. He was not ordained by somebody else. And Buddha wanted to start the conversation in a with a very great inspiration. Who is your teacher? Whose Dhamma do you profess? Then Pukusati said, friend, there is a recluse Gautama, the son of Sakyans who went forth from Sakyan clan. Now a good report of blessed Gautama has been spread to this effect. Then he said, Ditipiso Bhagavarang Samma Sambuddho, that part which we already know by heart. He said, this is the reputation of such and such a Gautama. I ordained in his name. He has not seen the Buddha, but he only heard that reputation from whom? King Bimbisara. Bimbisara wrote this description in that golden plate. And that is the description Pukusati read, and seeing that description, he was inspired. And he thought, I must go and see him. Then Buddha asked, bhikkhu, where is that blessed one, accomplished and fully enlightened, now living? So, and Pukusati replied that he is in Savatthi, And then the Buddha asked, have you ever seen the Blessed One before? Would you recognize him if you saw him? No, friend. Still Pukusati did not know that he is talking to Buddha. According to commentary, Buddha changed his normal appearance with his supernatural power to make him look like an ordinary monk. That is why Pukusati could not recognize him as an enlightened person, as the Buddha. So when Buddha asked whether if you see him, can you recognize him? He said, no, I cannot recognize him. Then Buddha thought this clansman has gone forth from the home life into homelessness under me. Suppose I were to teach him Dhamma. This is the time the Buddha decided to teach him Dhamma. Then Buddha gave this very inspiring discourse. And Buddha himself said, Bhikkhu, I will teach you Dhamma. Now this man was asking this question. Now Buddha took it upon himself and decided to teach him Dhamma. Listen attentively, yes friend, okay? Now, from this point down, things are very important and very profound discourse. Bhikkhu, this person consists of 6 elements, 6 bases of contact, and 18 kinds of mental exploration. And he has 4 foundations. The habit of conceiving do not seep over one who stands upon these foundations, and when the tides of conceiving no longer sweep over him, he is called sage at peace. So Buddha explained these things later. Now, in this explanation, he said 6 elements. We have studied earlier only 4 elements. What are they?
Earth, air, fire, water.
Right. Earth, water, air, fire. You can use any order. These are the 4 elements. Now he talks about 6 elements. And then in reference to what are these 6 elements? Earth element, water element, fire element, air element. And then he added 2 more elements, space element and consciousness element. Now, he also explained these things later in the discourse. This person consists of 6 bases of contact. Now, these bases are called ayatana. Normally we know these 6 bases. What are they?
Eye base, ear base, nose base, tongue base,
body, senses.
And mind. Okay. They are listed already here. Now, this person consists of 18 kinds of mental explorations. So it was said, and with reference to what was this said? Now this is important to remember. On seeing the form with the eye, one explores the form of product of joy and explores the form product of grief. One explores the form products of equanimity. Now, pleasure, pain, and equanimity. So these 18 kinds of mental exploration refer to what?
So the six sense bases.
3 kinds of feelings. Three kinds of feelings arising from 6 senses, 6 bases. For instance, when we see an object, there is a contact. Depending on contact arises feeling. 3 kinds of feeling: pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And when we multiply these 3 by 6, we get 18. And therefore 18 explorations means 18 kinds of feelings that arise from 6 senses. Okay? And then 4 foundations. We learn 4 foundations of mindfulness. And here Buddha talk about different type of 4 foundations. The foundation of wisdom, the foundation of truth, foundation of equanimity, and foundation of peace. Different type of foundations. Then one should not neglect wisdom and should preserve the truth, should cultivate relinquishment, and should train for peace. Now he explained these 4 in detail later. How does one not neglect wisdom? There are these 6 elements that Buddha earlier mentioned. Earth, water, air, fire, space, and consciousness. And then earth element, I think when we study Mahasatipatthana Sutta, I think you all remember, in Mahasatipatthana Sutta we studied these 32 parts of the body. When we talk about earth element, 20 of these 32 belong to earth element. What are these 20? I hope you remember them by heart. Kesa, Loma, Naka, Danta, Tacho, Mansan, Naharu, Atti, Attiminga, Vakkam, Hadayan, Yakanam, Kilomakam, Piyakam, Papasan, Antan, Antagunam, Udaryan, Karisan, 9, 19, what is the 20th? Mattalungam, brain. These 20 are called earth. These 20 belong to earth element. Now they are here. You can see English translation there. I don't have to spend time repeating English translation. Now, the difference is this. In Satipatthana, he has not explained in detail the similarity between internal earth element and external earth element. Here, he mentioned that these 2 are the same. In Mahahattivadogama Sutta and Maharahulovada Sutta, Mahavedalla Sutta, all these are explained. Now both the internal earth element and the external earth element are simply earth element. There is no difference between external earth elements and these 32 parts of the body. All these 32 parts are made of the same external elements.
When you say internal, Bhante, just what's inside me, right?
Inside us.
Inside us.
Inside us. And that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom thus. Now, you remember we studied the last sutta we studied the
Samadhi.
not Samadhi. Mahasalāyatanika Sutta. In the Mahasalāyatanika Sutta, Buddha began the discourse saying, only those who can see, know and see will liberate from suffering. Long discourse. That is how it began. One who knows and sees. What is the meaning of one who knows? One who sees. Knows means theoretically you know. Sees means with wisdom you see. That wisdom comes from insight meditation. When you practice insight meditation, you see things exactly as they are. That is the meaning of insight meditation. That is yatha bhuta jnana darsana. Vipassana. Vipassana. Vi means very special. Passana means seeing. Seeing things exactly as they are. I think we mentioned it several times. What are the things? Just quick quiz. What are the things we see as they are?
Suffering. Suffering.
Suffering also is a factor.
There's form,
Feeling.
like sound, taste, sound, like object of taste, like food.
Form, feeling.
Sound, feelings.
No, form, feelings.
Form, feelings,
mental perceptions.
Consciousness.
And,
Volitional forms. Volitional. These are the things. What it means? The five aggregates. We are made up of five aggregates: Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. These are the things that we must see as they really are. Nothing else. Everything is peripheral, not directly related. They are peripherally, secondary, subsidiary, extension. But the real things that we must see, even Mahasatipatthana Sutta, these are the five. These five are in Mahasatipatthana, although it has only four categories. Kāyānupassana, Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana, Dhammanupassana. Kāyānupassana is the form, Vedananupassana is feeling, Chittanupassana means mind and perception, both together, put Chittanupassana, perception. And then Dhammanupassana is all sankharas. Sankhara. So, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. Vijnana is consciousness and perception. These two go together as mind, Chittanupassana. So, seeing them exactly as they are is vipassana. Vipassana. So, this is not, then in here, and that should be seen as it actually is with proper wisdom. Here, what we see with proper wisdom is, this is not mine. This I am not. This is not my self. These three things we must see as they are. I mentioned several times in Anatta Lakkana Sutta, that is the conclusion. Remember that netang mama neso amasmi nameso atta. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. This is tanha, mana, ditti. Tanha says this is mine. Tanha means craving, desire, greed. Says this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Mana means I. Million times you use the word I when you have a conversation. That is conceit. Ditti is self. So tanha, mana, ditti, we see tanha represent as this is mine, mana represent as this I am, and ditti represent as my self. You can see the word myself, not one word. My self, two words. And seeing them exactly as they are is called what? Wisdom. Wisdom. So the wise person does not hang on to my. And I. Myself. The wise person does not hang on to them. They are just normally conventional usage or concept that we use for communication purpose. Without saying mind, we cannot make a conversation. This is my book, this is my hand, this is my table, this. We have to say in order to distinguish one from the other. And this I am, we have to say I am this, I am that, and so on, in order to communicate easy. And also in order to refer to oneself, this is self, reflexive sense, we have to use the word self. Other than that, they really don't exist, anything there. For instance, when we say this I am, you ask, what is this? What is your I? We ask, what is our I? Is form I? Feeling I? Perception I? Thoughts I? And consciousness I? When we really look at each of them separately, you cannot find I there. You see? And therefore seeing this exactly as they are is called wisdom. One becomes then, when one sees it thus as it actually is with proper wisdom, then one becomes disenchanted with earth element and makes the mind dispassionate towards the earth element. Same thing goes with water element, air element, fire element, space element and consciousness element. Okay? Then water element. Now, what are the water elements? In the water element, Pittang, Semmang, Ubbo, Lohitang, Sedo, Medo, Asu, Vasa, Kelo, Singanika, Lasika, Muttang. Remaining 12 are called water element. Out of these 32, first 20 is earth element, remaining 12 water elements. And water element also one sees as they are without trying to identify them differently. Similarly, 5 elements. In the 32 parts of the body, no 5 elements is mentioned. And we can see the description of 5 elements. Whatever internally belongs to oneself is fiery, and clung to, that is that by which one is warmed, ages, and is consumed, and that by which that is eaten, drunk, consumed, and tasted, gets completely digested, or whatever else internally belonging to oneself is fire. Now, 5 elements also we must see, this is not mine, this is not myself, this is not I am. Now the next is air elements, also the same, that where we breathe, and internal air and movement and all this. And that also is not mine, and so forth. Now then space element. The space element is something different. That is wherever the cavity or holes in the body, there is space. In the sweat pores, nose, ear, and whatever space holes are there, these holes are filled with air element. And that also must be seen as it is, with proper wisdom. Seeing them as proper wisdom is, I mentioned, is that they are all impermanent. In addition to this, they all are impermanent. We must see them changing. Even space element, when we think of certain space, when something put in that space is changed. Now, then consciousness element. Consciousness element is what does one cognize with that consciousness? One cognizes this is pleasant and so forth, painful, neither pleasant nor painful nor pleasant, and it in dependent on contact to be felt as pleasant, there arises a pleasant feeling. When one feels pleasant feeling, one understands, I feel pleasant feeling. One understands with the cessation of that same contact to be felt as pleasant, its corresponding feeling, the pleasant feeling that arose in dependence on that contact to be felt as pleasant, ceases and subsides. In other words, pleasant feeling arises depending on the contact with eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind. Unpleasant feeling arises from the contact of eyes, ears, nose and so forth. When the 6 senses contact with 6 sensory objects, 3 kinds of feelings arise: pleasant, unpleasant and neutral. When something is disconnected, not contacted, then that feeling disappears. So, therefore, the same thing goes with the other feelings. Because Buddha gave an example. Just as from the contact one frictions of two fire sticks, heat is generated and fire is produced. And with the separation and disjunction of those two fire sticks, the corresponding heat ceases and subsides. Now these days we don't have to do that to get fire. But Buddha gave an example how fire is produced. In fact, he used the sticks. Today we use wires, two wires. Same thing. You have to get positive and negative wires together to light the bulb. That means two things must come together to generate third thing, that is in this case light. We don't have to use fire stick now or rocks to rub it. But the principle is the same. The two things must, in the car, to start the car, you turn the ignition key, then what you call igniter, spark, that's a spark plug, and they must come together, contact, and then might start. So what the Buddha said is, what he said those days is true even today in this modern technological society. Two things must contact in order to have a third possibility. So, same thing goes with all kind of feelings. Then, that means they are not arising individually, independent of anything. That means everything arises dependent on something. No science, no technology can make something produced by itself. That is the truth. And this truth in a very crude, with crude examples Buddha proved those days. Today it has been refined and the principle still is the same. Okay. Now, next one, consciousness. And then when painful, pleasant, and neither painful nor pleasant feelings are gone, then when the contact disappears, they disappears. When one feels whatever feeling is, one understands this is such and such a feeling. If the pleasant feeling is there, one knows this is pleasant feeling. One does not have to say that this is pleasant feeling. One simply knows. And that knowing is the function of the consciousness. Consciousness knows. What Buddha wanted to show here is not repeating the pleasant, unpleasant or neutral feelings, but their presence is recognized by consciousness. So, okay. When particular feeling ceases, he understands that that sense feeling is okay. Now remains purified equanimity. Then there remains only equanimity, purified and bright, malleable, wieldy and radiant. That is very interesting description of equanimity.
Bhante, I don't think we have that in the handout, do we?
No?
We just finished consciousness and then we have the Pali, page 8.
Okay. I think it is better to stop here and go to Pali to some day. Because if I were to explain the entire Sutta, it will take more than 2 hours.
Right.
The description of the content of Dhamma in the Sutta itself. And therefore we stop here. We start equanimity on the 28.
No, we don't have another one this month.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah.
Bhante, you have that.
Now today is
11, 18.
18th we cannot tell because of the Vesak celebration.
Oh,
Says
we're not
Vesak
having
25th.
one. We have it on the
25th.
25th I won't be here.
25th and June only, no, 16th.
18th we cannot tell because that is the day we prepare for the Vesak celebration.
We don't want to have one. We advertise it, but we don't have it.
No, we don't have to.
Yeah.
And then 25th I go out,
Right.
and then
I have the
Then
date
June
for
1st.
June.
June 1st is Brahmavihara retreat.
Brahmavihara retreat.
June 8th is a board meeting.
Board meeting.
June 16th and then
Huh?
June 16th is possible.
Yeah, I have those dates,
June
and I'll
6th.
remove those dates, and
Okay.
I'll send it to you. Krishna.
Okay.
Bhante, is there a donation? I'm just wondering why the space element, why, do you know the rationale for the space element? Both internally, I see the explanation, and externally, can you just talk about that a little bit, because that's new to me.
Actually it is new to most people because we don't talk about space elements. Space we use, everything occupies in space. And space, when you practice meditation, there is a state when you go above fourth jhanic state. There is another development of meditation which is called infinite space, akasanan chayatana. Infinite space, ayatana means base of infinite space meditation, attainment. Now this space is infinite so long as there is no object. But space can be limited when objects occupy the space. Now here is a space. Now it is limited space by walls, ceilings, floor, and so forth. It is originally one space, that is space element. But we make this one boundless, illimitable, infinite space, limited space, by having objects in the space. And therefore, just like earth element in itself, we really cannot see. Only through characteristics we know earth element. Similarly, space is, we cannot see space, but when you put objects, then we limit certain area, then we call this space. There is a space between this and that, this chair and that chair. Only when the space is identified by using objects. If there are no objects, we simply can talk only space, and which we cannot identify without objects. I think for this reason, I have not seen the reason why space element is added, introduced. But when we talk about Dhamma meditation, in meditation practice there is this what you call infinite space base, that is Akasanancha Ayatana. There are four attainments which are called jhanas. They are attainments, and these attainments are called Akasananchayatana, Vijnananchayatana, Akincanyayatana, Neva Sanyana Sanyayatana. Out of them, Akasananchayatana refers to space. It is called limited space. Limited space is used as an object for meditation. Space is limited by having other objects in it. For instance, it is described in commentary like Visuddhimagga that Kasinughatam Akasa. Kasina means an object that we make to focus our mind. For instance, you take sort of clay and make a disc out of that with pure, clean, good clay. You make a disc 18 inches in diameter. You make a circle and put it in front of you at your eye level and focus your mind on that object, that clay circle, and try to visualize it and memorize it. And then you close your eyes. If the image is not properly memorized, then open your eyes and look at it again until you memorize that image of that clay. The first is called Uggha-nimitta, the learning sign. Then what you memorize is called Patibhaga-nimitta, counterpart sign. Once you have that sign, you move from that place to another place and sit and focus your mind on the memorized image to gain concentration. That is how you practice that jhana. So, that's the Kasina jhana. When you want to, Kasina is the material object. When you want to go to immaterial state, mentally you remove that object, and then that means you forget that.
Say that part again?
You forget. You don't remember that. And use that space which was previously occupied by the Kasina circle. And that is called Kasina Uggata Akasa. That means unlimited space you take a part and make it limited. Only for this kind of things we use, the meditation tradition has developed this method of using space.
And then you said that that image, then you forget it, and then we're left with.
Then you what?
So we have the disc, or I'm thinking a leaf. A leaf would be easy for my mind. So I see the leaf outside in nature. I sit on the cushion. I can remember the leaf shape in my mind.
Uh-huh.
So there's an object occupying the space.
Right, right.
Then you said to forget the image. Did I mishear? Forget the image?
Yeah, you
And
forgot.
then we're left with just the empty space.
You left with that space that leaf had already previously occupied.
Would that be similar to when we're meditating the breath, the in-breath, and
Uh-huh.
that space in between? Not the in-breath, not the out-breath.
Now, the space between inhaling and exhaling is so insignificant that you hardly can notice it.
But that's a time base compared to this space.
That is mere word, but you can never find that space or even time between inhaling and exhaling. Because it is always when inhaling completes, then exhaling begins immediately. When exhaling completes, inhaling begins immediately, because the lungs collapse without oxygen. Lungs are made to pull air from outside and push it to back, to original space. And therefore, we can hold breath, but still there is air when you hold it. Without breath, you may stay for a couple of seconds underwater. But I don't know how long you can stay without breath.
8 minutes. I think somebody did 8 minutes. Oh.
How many minutes?
I think there was somebody who did 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bhante, just like space elements that it doesn't talk much about in suttas, but there is motion, speech, and is not talked either. But those are discussed in Abhidhamma, right?
What, space element?
Yeah, space element and motion and speech. Those are discussed in Abhidhamma.
Abhidhamma discussed the speed of time, that consciousness
Right.
arises, the time that consciousness takes to arise and pass away.
Right.
But I don't know how they can measure the.
Right. No, I'm saying in general, the space is not discussed in sutta much, but in the same way, the motion, like we animate, animate means we can move and everything, that's not mentioned much either. Or the speech is not mentioned much either. So I'm saying those are not addressed in suttas, but it's addressed in Abhidhamma, I think.
I don't know whether Abhidhamma discusses space, motion and time.
Right.
That involves velocity.
Yeah, velocity and stuff.
Yeah. I don't know.
Bhante, the thing is as I know, like in some schools of Buddhism, like South Africa, they don't, in their Abhidhamma, they don't have space element in the Rupa, sector. But again, even in Theravada Abhidhamma, do we have any element for time? I know Akasa Dhatu is there, so it's the space. But,
Yeah.
do we have time defined as an element in Abhidhamma? No, right?
No, I don't think so. I don't know any place. I have not studied Abhidhamma deeply. My Abhidhamma knowledge is very superficial. And with this limited knowledge of Abhidhamma, I cannot say any place where time and space and speed discussed. As Abhidhamma says, I think actually, it takes 17 time mind moments. When mind moments change 17 times, that is the time that the material object changes. Material objects.
Oh, this is the Chittakshana, Rupakshana.
Yeah, Chittakshana. 17 mind moments equal to one material change.
So the frequency of physical material things 17 times slower than the mind. So or in other words, mind vibrates 17 times faster than the material.
Yes, 17 times multiply by 3, 51.
Oh, really?
51. Because every mind moment has rising moment,
Right.
peak moment, passing away, upad moment, titi moment, and passing away, upad, Dhātuvibhanga. This rising and then existing, passing away, 3 moments for each mind moment. This is called minor moment, others are major moments. Therefore, there will be 51 mind moments equal to one material. Changing of material, the speed of material change.
This is at the quantum physics level, right?
I don't know. Anyway, to answer your question, that's all we can say. Yeah. Any more questions?
I'm still confused with actually space and the consciousness both. So if you can elaborate at least consciousness.
Let me second say this.
Consciousness
Let's try to.
little bit. That'll be helpful.
Let me do this one. I want to take
Prashant,
this.
what do you have to do to turn the phone?
Yeah, Bhante knows.
Bhante knows? Is it on Bhante? Or?
Yeah, hold on.
I don't know what is. Okay.
Just a sec.
Today I got this device. Okay.
Yeah, touch it.
Okay.
Go ahead and you take it to her. Can you hear me, Bhante?
Yeah,
What's your question?
Something.
I can hear you even without
Thank you
that.
so much for explaining additional.
Mhm.
But I'm pretty new to this Sutta. This is the first time I've joined here after meditation. Anyway, would you be able to explain a little bit more about consciousness? I'm still puzzled about space, but I think I can catch up a little bit more. And I think I can understand the fire and air and the four aspects a little bit more. But consciousness is very basic, the foundation of probably our discipline, but I'm still unclear.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. Consciousness is the base of everything. Because without consciousness, let me
Is it
take it
echo,
down.
Bhante?
Huh?
Do you hear echo? Can you turn it off?
I never.
Okay.
Without consciousness, you cannot know anything. And therefore consciousness is the base of all mental states. Right? Without consciousness, nothing is possible for the mind to know. And consciousness also is not something permanent. It does not exist by itself. Consciousness arises when two things come together. As I mentioned earlier, nothing can exist by itself. Even consciousness does not exist by itself. Consciousness arises when two things come together. What are the two things? Eye, visual objects, and consciousness. Ear, sound, consciousness. Nose, smell, consciousness. Tongue, taste, consciousness. Body, tangible, consciousness. The mind-based mental objects, consciousness. And therefore, consciousness is not something that always exists. Even when we are unconscious, when we come to consciousness, something must happen to get for us to have consciousness. Suppose somebody is totally unconscious. If somebody taps on him, hello, how are you? Then consciousness arises. Then response. Consciousness never arises without any objects. It can be internal, external, something happens. And therefore, although consciousness is the basis of everything, remember in the last discourse we mentioned a simile. I mentioned last discussion, samatha vipassana and so forth. The simile is this, that there is a city. In the city center square, there is a lord. There are 6 gates. At each gate, there is a gatekeeper. A messenger comes to each gate and delivers 2 messages and asks the gatekeeper where the lord of the city is. Gatekeeper tells the lord of the city is in the square, central square. And each messenger gives 2 messages. They come to the Lord in the city, sitting in the center, and give the message. 2 messages they give are samatha vipassana. The Lord of the city is consciousness. Remember that simile? You may not remember anything I said. That's okay. We have to repeat the same thing many times for people to remember. So, consciousness is the chief of the Lord that receives everything. And consciousness also is the seed. Vijnanam bijam. Remember we discussed kammam kettam, vijnanam bijam, tanha sineho. When you plant a seed, you have to have a water that is craving. So, although consciousness is the seed, although consciousness is the Lord, although consciousness is the base of everything, that consciousness cannot exist by itself.
So there is no taste without consciousness.
Right.
There is no sound without consciousness.
Could we say, Bhante, is the consciousness is the energy that holds or connection between mind and the body?
Mind and the body consciousness, consciousness can arise because of the mind and body.
Mind and body.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the glue that holds those two together, is it?
Consciousness, yeah, that is new concept, you just,
Maybe the awareness of consciousness
Yeah.
is the spark.
yeah. When you say glue or connection, that must have an independent existence. What I am trying to explain is that there is nothing independently existing.
But the magnetic energy is like that too. Or any other heat is like that. They are not independent. They still have to have something.
Right.
So it's some type of energy like heat or magnetic energy.
Magnetic energy where? In consciousness?
No, separately. Like you have two magnets and there's energy or heat. It's energy. So I'm just trying to say maybe it's another type of energy that our scientists do not understand yet.
Now, I don't know how scientists explain consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
They can explain neurons, neurological science and brain operation, all through the material substance. They can explain certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Consciousness is not something material,
Right.
and that is why you cannot pinpoint consciousness and say this is consciousness. Only through activities we know that consciousness, that there is something called consciousness, through activities. But even though it is the most powerful entity, it cannot exist by itself.
Mm-hmm.
In Mahatanna Sankaya Sutta, when Bhikkhu Sati said the same consciousness goes from life to life and life to life and so on. Buddha reprimanded him and he said, where have you heard this? Who said this thing to you? And he said, you, Venerable Sir, when you taught Dhamma, you taught. Where have you, foolish man, I said that? Have you heard me said that? And having reprimanded him, Buddha said, this consciousness does not exist by itself. When the I and visual objects come together, consciousness arises.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere in the Buddha's teaching that you can find that consciousness exists by itself, on its own. So, other than that, we cannot find it.
So is consciousness in the mind then?
Consciousness,
Because mind is one sense, and you said it's not in either eye or ear, but it uses the mind, so it somehow must be related to mind then.
sure, must be related to mind.
Yeah.
And consciousness is mind-based, surely.
Right.
That is why, and yet consciousness is an element. Mind is not called an element.
It's an ayatana, right?
Huh?
It's an ayatana.
Ayatana.
Yeah.
When you say ayatana means institute.
Yeah.
When you say institute, there is a staff, there is a secretary, there is a manager, there is a president, there is a managing officer, so forth and so on, titles. And similarly, when we say mind, There are so many things called mind contents, cetasika. According to Abhidhamma, there are 52. And in each of them, consciousness is there. None of these mental objects, mind contents, cetana, can exist by itself without consciousness. For instance, you say greed. Greed doesn't make any sense if consciousness is not there. Anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, whatever, anxiety, consciousness is there. You cannot say mind is there.
Say the last part again.
You cannot say mind,
You cannot say mind is there.
but consciousness is there. Vijnana.
So but consciousness is same as vijnana.
Yeah.
Consciousness is same as vijnana. The
Vijnana.
Pali word.
Vijnana is translated into English as consciousness.
Is there any other words, Bhante?
Hmm?
Is there any other words we could use instead of consciousness?
We may use awareness.
Awareness?
Awareness has more deeper connotation because awareness can be developed through the meditation practice. When we practice mindfulness, we develop our awareness. We don't develop consciousness. As the consciousness is the root and base that arises, and then awareness can arise after that.
So should we like try to eradicate consciousness?
Hmm?
Should we like try to eradicate consciousness? Is that
Eradicate?
Should we try to like eradicate, like get rid of consciousness? Can we do that?
Yeah, consciousness is consciousness can be purified. It will disappear only when one attains Nibbana. Otherwise, you cannot eradicate, as it is the root of all our.
So you need consciousness to develop wisdom. I mean, consciousness is required for everything.
Consciousness requires for everything. Like oxygen requires for us to live, for life, like that. Consciousness is required.
Can I clarify one thing if I have time? I mean, basically, I was under the impression from birth to death, like we are having like consciousness, like one after another. So when there's nothing happening, there's Bhavanga, and if there's a trigger, like I see the flower near you, so I get like Chakku Vinyana or something, and then like again it's Bhavanga, and then I think about something, like further something, so then I get like Mano Vinyana. So is it consistent, like what the way I understand it, is it consistent with like what you say basically? What I say is like there's some consciousness every time, and it changes like when we get some trigger from the outer world.
Now, according to Abhidhamma, consciousness has 3 stages. Vijnana, Patisandhi Vijnana, Chuti Vijnana or Chuti Chitta, in between Bhavanga. Bhavanga. Bhavanga is limb that connect between 2 lives. This life connects with the next. It's called Bhavana. Now, Patisandhi Vijnana. It is Rupa Vedana is one of the 5 aggregates. Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. But that Vijnana, whether it is birth consciousness or living consciousness, Bhavanga, continuum, life continuum consciousness, or passing away consciousness, death, Chuti Chitta. All this happens with something for it to arise. There must be something to arise. For instance, Patisandhi. Patisandhi, I don't know how good that term is according to sutras. Sandhi means joining. That like with this. Joining in the sense that there is out of these 3 moments, rising moment, existing moment and passing away moment, and the passing away moment passes away leaving something behind because of the avidya and tanha. Craving and ignorance is the driving force of consciousness from one life to another. And there must be something for the consciousness to arise. Either greed must be there or ignorance must be there for consciousness to arise. And therefore, combining these 3, consciousness, greed and ignorance, rebirth consciousness arises. Rebirth consciousness arises because of other 3 things in the past. Although those 3 things have completely ceased, do not exist anymore, their residue is an object for rebirth consciousness. And that is why as soon as rebirth consciousness is taken place, greed arises, ignorance arises, because the root is there. And but it does not, consciousness even there does not exist by itself without these 3 other 3 things.
So, Bhante, so when things are, when taints are spoken of, is that the residue? Is that the momentum that carries the consciousness into the next becoming?
Yeah?
Is that, or is it when taints are spoken of, is that the residue that sort of follows the consciousness?
Yeah. The residue is the supporting condition for consciousness to arise.
Is it residue or a real element, basic elements? I'm a little bit confused. Now I get a little bit I'd like to get a more accurate term between residue versus fundamental basics of something holds us. Or I felt kind of a residue seems to be a little bit
weak.
Yes.
You say
exactly.
Fundamental root is stronger. Actually, the greed and ignorance are the roots that keeps us going from life to life. But we also have accumulated greed and ignorance in every life. And when we pass away, in addition to our fundamental basic greed and ignorance, we added more greed and ignorance. They become the basis or residues for the next life.
How can we improve?
Improve morality, concentration, and wisdom. These three things we have to cultivate. All these three we can cultivate by meditation. When we meditate, both samatha and vipassana, tranquility meditation and insight meditation, we practice to improve ourselves.
So that means improve consciousness as well. That's what I mean.
Consciousness improves naturally when we practice everything: morality, concentration, and wisdom. Sila, samadhi, panya. Through concentration we practice sila and samadhi. By vipassana we practice wisdom. When we practice these three, then we naturally improve every moment we practice.
So, I'm sorry, so when you say improve consciousness, does it mean improve awareness or like vijnana consciousness?
Improve our mental state, which includes vijnana as well. Vijnana you cannot separate from the mind, because mind also based on vijnana.
It's like a medium. Consciousness is like a medium. Or a glue or medium compared to like a bank or have money or something, or kusala bank or something, right?
Right.
It's just a medium.
Right. Yeah.
Bhante, how does this end? What's the ending of this sutta?
You want to end before the beginning. Okay, it ends that Pukkusati recognizing the Buddha, and eventually he came to the Buddha and confessed that originally he thought that he was an ordinary monk. As the conversation progressed, Pukkusati slowly began to understand this must be that enlightened one. And finally, when the Buddha concluded the discourse, Pukkusati came to him and bowed down to him and confessed, Venerable Sir, you are that Buddha. I have made a blunder by calling you friend. Please forgive me. Then Buddha said, yes, I understand that you made a blunder and I forgive you. And Pukkusati attained anagami state, never eternal state. And then Buddha asked him, then Pukkusati said to the Buddha that he wanted to become a monk under the Buddha. Then Buddha said, I don't ordain person without his robes and balls, alms balls. Go and bring your 3 robes and alms balls. Pukkusati went looking for them. He could not go too far. There was a stray cow with a calf. She attacked him and killed him.
Oh no.
Pukkusati died like that. Then bhikkhus assembled and asked and began to discuss about Pukkusati's death. Buddha said, don't worry, he is a wise person. He attained the third level of enlightenment before he died. And he was born in one of the 5 pure abodes. The lowest is called Aviha. All Anagamis are born in that particular state, Aviha state, and then go up to Akanittaka and then pass away.
And they become arahant when they pass away, right?
Yes, they become arahant either in Aviha state as soon as they are born there, right away they develop their insight and attain arahanthood.
What is the meditation of infinite consciousness looks like then?
What?
Infinite consciousness,
Uh-huh.
stage of, like you explain infinite space. What is infinite consciousness, jhana of?
See, there's another good question. When space is infinite, one becomes conscious of that infinite space. Therefore, the consciousness becomes infinite.
Simple answer.
Eh?
Simple answer.
Simple.
So we don't know if the space is infinite or not.
Eh?
I said we don't know if the space is infinite or not.
I think we know. We know because you can never ever find a beginning and end of space.
I was just making a joke.
What?
I was making a joke.
Yeah. Okay.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Come next month.